Let's get to Canberra right now. The Liberal Senator for New South Wales, Senator Hollie Hughes, joins us. Hollie, welcome back to TNT Radio.
Hey, Smithy, how you going?
Doing very well. You have had an interesting day, I bet, presiding over testimony from the ABC CEO in a grilling, no doubt, in Senate estimates. How did Mr. Anderson explain his news department's biased coverage of The Voice?
Well,
Please.
as what will probably be no surprise to anyone, it was denied that there was any bias whatsoever when it came to the ABC's coverage of The Voice. Mr. Anderson let us know that there would be external auditors appointed to do a review. I did qualify that these would not be former ABC journalists or the like, but I did qualify that these would not be former ABC journalists or the like, but they will have that review and we have them back in estimates in February. So we will no doubt have a chat about the review, but there was a lot of other things to cover off, including the Heston Russell defamation case, as well as the coverage of the conflict in Israel and Gaza, or the war that's currently happening in the Middle East. And I'm sure many of your listeners would know about the ABC journalist who, on a chat group with, apparently, according to Mr. Anderson, hundreds of international journalists, referred to the beheading of babies as BS, Tom Joyner. And we have learnt today that he has been rotated out of covering Israel.
He's been rotated out, has he?
He has, yes. So that I just learnt that probably about half an hour ago.
Right. Isn't that interesting? Can I ask you a little bit about what Anderson said in terms of those other issues that you raised today? The Voice is one thing, and I guess you couldn't get far on that if he's going to deny the premise, and the premise being that they were biased. But on the other issues, did he at all sort of say, well, we could have got that better, we could have done better here, we could have... He doesn't give an inch, this bloke, does he?
No, look, not really.
No.
We don't really get very far. I've certainly had, I don't know whether you call it success, in the past where we had a stringer who'd made anti-Semitic tweets in the Middle East is no longer employed by the ABC. But other than that, there seems to be a culture of, and certainly, we said it to Mr. Anderson today, that these people are excellent journalists who made an error, but that everything else is fantastic. So the Heston Russell case, for example, may end up costing in excess of $3 million. And, of course, that will be borne by the taxpayer as it is
doesn't that make you...
taxpayer-funded organisation.
All through that process, he was saying, you have not got this right, and he was proven to be correct.
Yeah, absolutely. And as you know, when I was away a couple of weeks ago with Talisman Sabre, speaking to some of our Defence Force helicopter pilots and some of our troops, when this sort of came up, and this was obviously before the ABC had been found to defame Heston, all of the guys that I spoke to said it's the most ridiculous claim in the world, because we all know how many seats there are on a helicopter. And, we're not going to, it was just ludicrous in its proposal. And he said, if you got to make room for one more on the floor or whatever, you do that. But he said the notion that somehow or other they wouldn't have known exactly how many seats were on a helicopter is just insane.
Yes. And then the person who was the main source for the ABC has since said sorry to Heston, as reported by Ben Fordham on 2GB today. That says it all to me. Can I get back to the Labor government's Back to the Future IR reforms for a second, the same job, same pay model? We read today about the fabulous economist Judith Sloan saying that, about the one-size-fits-all approach will help unions, but it punishes workers. And in another story, also in The Australian, consumers can expect to pay more for groceries. They have no idea, this mob, except, of course, the unions are due to be paid off for their election duties, aren't they?
Absolutely. 10% of the Australian population is a member of the union, but this government only seems to govern for the unions, and everything that they are doing, particularly around IR, But remember, they wanted to also remove reporting for superannuation organisations to publish who they donated money to.
That's right.
All of these things are done, of course, to bolster the unions.
Yeah.
The gig economy, where more and more people are getting jobs and are utilising that form of employment to flexibly manage their own lives and their own work. They're really trying to just fundamentally kill that. And so your Uber Eats will be considerably more expensive if it even exists. And then you've got situations around being able to put on casual workers and how that's actually going to work if you are in, a seasonal situation that, pick the fruit or whatever it might be. But of course, when it costs farmers more to get something to the supermarket, you're going to pay more for it at the till.
As if people can handle any more of that right now. Like, seriously, it's got beyond chronic. Question without notice. This came up while you were in grilling the CEO of the ABC. Former Treasurer Joe Hockey has accused politicians who failed to cut spending of being a cancer in our community, in comments that, of course, revisit his landmark 2012 speech, which prematurely declared the age of entitlement is over. Well, Labor's in, Hollie, so their entitlement is not over.
No, look, I haven't seen what Joe has said. This government certainly seems to be making absolutely no attempt to cut spending.
No.
Any programs they are considering cutting, particularly programs around infrastructure to be built in rural and regional areas, because those people don't vote for them. But any of those things that are being cut, the money's certainly not going back into the bottom line. It's going on to more of their pet projects, and as we just said, to boost their union mates' coffers.
Yeah. Now, if my antennae is any guide, the mob do not like junior politicians like councillors acting like they're some kind of federal government MPs. And this is a classic case. Over 2 days now, we've heard how the City of Sydney Mayor Clover Moore has refused to fly an Israeli flag in support of their plight after that terror attack. And there are also plans by her council, to bring down some of Sydney's most historic statues of colonial pioneers. Out of control, woke crap.
Seriously, I live in Clover Moore's electorate in the City of Sydney. They need to concentrate on picking up the rubbish. We certainly had that around our area. And even at the beginning of this year, when we had World Pride on, something that the City of Sydney was very big at espousing what a great job they were doing about it. We had rats running around. It was absolutely disgusting because there was disputes with the garbage collectors. This is so out of the realm of what they're responsible for. I mean, aside from the fact Sydney City itself was absolutely blanketed with vote yes banners. So how much the ratepayers of Sydney were paying for that. But Clover Moore just can't seem to help herself, but she keeps getting in with an increased margin. But if you see some of the Facebook groups around local areas, they complain about all of these council issues like garbage collection that should be the priority. Some of the roads, it's rates, roads and rubbish for local council as far as I'm concerned.
It should be.
And, I so want to comment on some of these Facebook groups that elections have consequences. But unfortunately, it seems, as these people told us they were the smartest people in the room voting yes for the voice. Well, being smart doesn't seem to mean that you get the right electoral outcomes if you go with their logic.
And if you don't like our colonial pioneers, don't take advantage of any of the progression we've made because of them. Maybe that was something that they could do, live in a Spartan kind of lifestyle as opposed to benefiting from the education, from the legal system, from the fact that we've got progression in all ways. We're a first world country, would not have been a first world country if we hadn't have been colonialised. Maybe they could go back to those stages prior to 1788.
Oh, don't be ridiculous. Hunter-gatherer, I've got the organic section at Harris Farm.
I love it. The new head of the New South Wales public education system sounds like he might be from outside of the woke education bubble, which is a change. Murat Dizdar has called on schools to double down on the use of explicit instruction, a teaching method that gives students step-by-step and clear instructions in a bid to boost results. Of course, what's been the trendy method of teaching up until he said that today has been the workshop approach, Hollie, where the kids figure out for themselves how to go about stuff. I like this, Boffin.
Look, I think it's really refreshing and I know you've got younger kids, mine are in high school now, but for them to be actually taught some of the basics around reading, writing, literacy, numeracy, those sorts of things need to come back to the top of the agenda.
Yeah.
NAPLAN tests were designed to sort of monitor a child's progress, not necessarily to really be anything other than an indicator of where they were on that day and whether every 2 or 3 years when it's done, how far the child had progressed and if there were particular issues in particular areas. And the fact that they're now also, I understand, going to remove the targets for schools to hit. And so hopefully not only will the teachers be teaching in a much clearer fashion, but that they won't be necessarily just teaching to the NAPLAN test.
Yes, which is what they do.
Yeah, so their kids are actually learning skills and learning how to, actually learning the basics that allow them to then go on and develop when they get to high school and whatever they do post-school, rather than them teaching to the NAPLAN only for that result and teaching them in a way that, I mean, honestly, it's just been so touchy-feely. It just doesn't work. Kids need to have structure. You've got kids, you know what it's like when it's all a bit chaotic versus when you've got a bit of structure on the show. Kids need that structure and certainty, and I think this is a much better way of doing it.
It's like I always think of it in terms of teaching them how to tie their shoelaces. Like I can teach them how to tie their shoelaces with 3 or 4 instructions over 3 mornings. They then tie their shoelaces. If I said to them, here's your shoe, you try and work out how to tie your shoelace, they'll be there for the next 6 months trying to work out how to do it. That's why that method of teaching was wrong. It was never as successful as instruction, direct one-on-one instruction.
No. Well, I mean, I've got an autistic son, and that was the way we taught him everything, and everything was broke down into very small steps and individual steps. As I often say to people, do you know how many steps there are in washing your hands? And there's about 9, and people don't realise that. And we taught every single one of those steps to make sure that, individually, and you actually teach them from the back end.
Wow.
So that you teach, so when they get that last step and then the second last step and the third last step, it's closer to what we refer to as reinforcement, but the recognition. It was very effective for a child who was never supposed to speak, who never shuts up now. So I think it works for every kid.
Yeah, interesting. Alina has sent me a comment on our chat line. It says, but the kids aren't taught how, or I guess that should be taught how to interpret those instructions, and consequently they have opted out for step-by-step instructions, which is a problem created by bad teaching practices, and a solution leads to many more problems down the track. I think we're with you, Alina. I think we're all on the same page. Appreciate that, Hollie. I'll let you get back to real work. Thank you so much for your time.
Thanks, Smithy. Have a good week.
Good on you, and same to you. Liberal Senator for New South Wales, Senator Hollie Hughes.